Okay, so welcome everyone to a conversation with Dr. Maggie Ellis. I'm absolutely delighted to have Maggie here. We have just been bonding over vegan Kievs from M&S. So my name is Emma Smith. I am the project manager with Empowered Conversations, and this is our 22nd a conversation with that we've been doing for the last few years. So I think that's pretty good out of this living room, not too bad. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of background about Empowered Conversations. We're then going to hand over to Maggie for her presentation, and then you'll Joy said, I didn't think you ironed anything. Well, no, Joy. All right, that's it now with the chat because it's very just off-putting. And then we're going to have a Q&A. So at the bottom, so obviously a lot of you have found the chat function, so well done for that. So I'm going to direct you now over to the Q&A. So if when Maggie is speaking, you've got any questions, you can just write them down in the Q&A box, and then we will pick them up at the end and we'll have plenty of time to talk then. Okay, so as I said, I work for, I'm the project manager with Empowered Conversations. It's an Age UK Salford project, and we deliver communication courses for family carers across Greater Manchester, and we also work with professional carers as well. We have a project called Empowered Carers, which offers one-to-one support for carers just in Salford. And as a result of COVID, we've been doing a lot of online stuff over the last year. So we have regular engagement sessions, we have weekly carers groups, and we have these webinars, which sort of came out of a conference that didn't happen. And then we thought we'd try this, and it's worked quite well. So as I said, I'm absolutely delighted. Oh, hello, Chris. Lovely to see you. Right, that's it. No more chat in the chat box, everyone. You've got to go over to the Q&A, okay? So, well, Chris, it is lovely to see you. So I'm glad that you're here with us today. So really, really excited that Maggie's with us today. I'm really, really excited to listen to your presentation about adaptive interaction. So I'm going to hand over to you, Maggie. I'm going to get everyone now. No more chat. Move to the Q&A if you want to talk to us, okay? And I'm handing to you, Maggie.
Thanks very much, Emma. So I'm going to share my screen with you and try not to show you my dad's shopping list from last night. Try not to share that. Can you see my slides and not the shopping list?
I've got your slides. Did you do sound as well?
I didn't. No. Stop share. Give me a sec. Share screen. Share sound. Yes. Okay. Right. I'm good. I'm good. Right. So slideshow. Right. Okay. Everybody see me, hear me okay? I can't see anyone or hear anyone. So if someone can just say yes, that would be great.
That'll have to be me then, Maggie. Yes, I can see you, and yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thanks very much for having me. I'm really delighted to be here. I spoke to Emma and a couple of other people from Empowered Conversations a while back now, and they got in touch again, and I got really excited about taking part in one of these courses. And I was invited to do a webinar and thought, absolutely, I'd love to do that. So my name is Maggie Ellis. I'm a senior lecturer in psychology at the University of St Andrews. I have been working with people with dementia, their family members and professional carers for 20 years this year. I can't believe it. So 20 years of experience. I started off as a volunteer. I then became a research assistant, and when I became a lecturer, all my research and teaching was on dementia and still is to this day. I'm particularly interested in facilitating communication for people with very advanced dementia. So we're talking here about individuals who have very little or no speech at all. And as far as we're aware, very little or no understanding of the speech of others. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Adaptive interaction is a method of communication that was developed by myself and my long-time collaborator, Professor Arlene Estelle. So I'm going to talk to you about the story of adaptive interaction today and where it came from, because I think that's a really good way to introduce you to it. Okay. So, first thing I've got here is one of my own quotes. I might as well quote myself because no one else is going to do it. So, in order to approach communication with individuals with advanced dementia, we must first reconsider our ideas of what it means to communicate. So we would typically consider communication to be speech, written text, hand gestures, all these sorts of things that have some sort of a meaning that the other person can understand. We consider communication to be passing messages between individuals. When it comes to people with advanced dementia who don't understand the speech of others or can't produce speech, we have to really think about how is it possible to communicate with these individuals, and how must we reconsider communication? How must we see communication in a new light when we're thinking about communicating with these individuals? So I'd like you to think about that today. That's your task. Okay, trying to move on to the next slide. Okay, so when we think about communication in individuals with advanced dementia, what we know is that eventually the ability to both produce and, as far as we can tell, understand speech is lost. So those of you who know individuals or have met individuals at later stages of dementia may have noticed that people often engage in persistent bodily movements and repetitive sounds. So, for example, you may know someone who walks up and down the corridor in the care home all the time, tapping on the walls, or maybe making a sound while they do it. These are the sorts of things I'm talking about. When you see some of the videos I'm going to show you, you'll understand a bit more about what I mean. But just try and consider someone that you've met who maybe engages in these types of actions. What's important to realise is that these actions are not meaningless and random, as some of us may have previously thought. They're actually the fundamentals of communication, and we engage in these actions when we're very young infants, right to the end of our lives. We all have a set of these actions that we use on a daily basis. We're not always aware that we use them. So these are the pre-speech fundamentals of communication. So people with advanced dementia still retain these abilities right at the end of their lives. And it's important that we are able to identify and maybe work with these. Tom Kitwood, I'm sure lots of you have heard of Tom Kitwood, was a trailblazer in the dementia field. He regarded these repetitive actions as providing stimulation to the person, and as he said, possibly represent her last desperate bid to remain psychologically alive. Okay, so this is almost like a self-talk that the person is engaging in, trying to engage other people, but because we are unaware that we can use these actions to communicate with the person, and that this is the person making a bid to communicate with us. These things are tended to be ignored in care situations, or people try to minimise them because they may be causing a disturbance in the home setting. And because we don't interact with these actions produced by the person, what we find is that people with dementia really start to retreat into their own world and just stop trying to communicate with the outside world. Okay, so when we think about relationships in advanced dementia, it's really hard to consider that we can actually have a relationship with someone who doesn't talk or doesn't understand speech. But we know that strong social bonds can help people to live well with dementia. We know that. But how do we maintain a relationship with someone, so perhaps maybe our loved one we've lived with for 40 years, how do we maintain that relationship when speech and understanding is gone? Or if you're a professional carer working in a care home setting, for example, how do you actually break into the person's world and create a relationship with them? How is that possible when the person doesn't speak or understand speech? Is it possible? So what I'd like you to consider here is, could we use these fundamentals of communication as a basis for interaction between people with advanced dementia and their caregivers and families? So consider the actions I mentioned earlier. So for example, a person walking up and down the corridor, maybe tapping on the wall and making a sound. Could we use those actions to engage the person? If we consider that this is now their form of communication, their mode of communication, could we use that to get into their world somehow? Okay, so I became interested in this work a long time ago when I was invited to a conference on what's called intensive interaction. You may have heard that before. Intensive interaction was developed in the 1980s as a method of providing communication between people with multiple and profound learning disabilities and their family members and caregivers. And it's a very successful approach. You see lots of communication and behaviour change. You see lots of smiling, laughing, eye gaze, shared eye gaze. It's incredible when you see the before and afters in using this type of approach. So I was at this conference thinking, this is fantastic. It's amazing work that these individuals are doing. So it involves behaviour matching. So instead of outright imitating something that someone does, it involves matching it in some way. So, for example, if I was walking next to the lady who is tapping the wall and making a sound, maybe I would take her hand and tap her hand to the same rhythm as she does on the wall. So this is her rhythm that I'm talking to her in. And there are lots of different things that we could try with intensive interaction. But it isn't one size fits all, and it's about learning the language of each person. Again, it involves very little or no speech, so that's okay for people with advanced dementia. It focuses on these pre-speech fundamentals of communication that I mentioned earlier, so things like turn taking, backwards and forwards, shared attention, eye gaze, movements, sounds, facial expressions. And just to reiterate that these are abilities that we are born with, they develop over time and we don't lose them. And it's also important to remember that we all have our own repertoire of these actions and behaviours. For example, I use my hands all the time when I'm talking. It's probably a bit irritating, I'm sorry. But that's just one of the things that's in my repertoire, okay? You could probably think of what is in your own repertoire. Okay, so at this conference, I became really excited about the idea of maybe trying intensive interaction with a person with advanced dementia, because what I could see the similarities as this no speech, no understanding of speech, the same as the people with multiple and profound learning disabilities who are using this approach. And it also involves actions that the person already uses. The person doesn't have to be able to talk to use this. So I thought it was the next logical step to go and try this, because what I had noticed when I was a research assistant for several years is that every time I went into a care home to recruit people with dementia to take part in a project, it's always people who talk and are able to engage with you that you can recruit, right? So I would be having conversations with people with dementia, talking about the research, having fun with them, having a laugh. But at the same time, I was aware that there were these individuals who were on their own in their rooms because they couldn't get up and walk about, and they found it very, very difficult to communicate. So as far as I could see at that point, there was very little going on for these people. And I really wanted to try intensive interaction with one person at least to see if there was any sort of scope in it for increasing the person's opportunities to have just a social interaction just for the sake of it. What we saw in care facilities at that point was that every time someone with very advanced dementia was communicated with was a sort of a functional activity. So during a function of daily living, so for example, a caregiver would come in and help the person to eat, or help them to shower, or help them to use the loo. There were no occasions where a caregiver came in and just tried to interact with the person. Probably because there isn't enough time, and that is no one's fault. And secondly, if you don't know that the person is attempting to communicate with you and that it is possible to communicate back, why would you bother? Why would you go in there in the first place? Except to check the person is okay. So excited by this approach, I had it in my head that I was immediately going to go to a care home and try this out with someone. But of course, the research world doesn't work like that. So I had to apply for NHS ethical approval to go to a care home and try to recruit someone through their family member. That took a long time. But eventually I was introduced to Edie through her daughter. And her daughter was very keen for Edie to take part in this project because she was very isolated in the care home, and the only visitor that she had was when her daughter came to see her. And she felt that people just weren't communicating with her during the day. So at this point, Edie was 81 years old. She'd be living in the care home for 5 years. She had lost the ability to speak and to walk, so she spent all day alone in her room. And this last point here, made a loud sound. That was one of the reasons that she was alone in her room, is because she did make this loud sound fairly regularly. And the professional caregivers told me that they thought that it was disturbing the other residents, it was making people upset. So when she started to make her sound, she was taken through in her wheelchair back to her room. So this is Edie's life. Any time she tries to communicate, she's taken back into her room. Okay, so what I'd like to show you is a speech-based interaction that I had with Edie. And the questions I ask her are based on the questions that I heard carers ask her. So things like, have you seen the weather outside today? Have you had your breakfast? This is when people come into the room to help her with their functional activities. So these are the sorts of questions I heard being asked. So I asked her closed questions that require a yes or no answer. I didn't expect her to answer, but we did that so that we could give her the best possible chance to nod or shake her head if she could answer. We also left a gap in between the questions to give her enough time, because obviously her processing of the information would be much slower. So you'll see me on this video, very interesting hairdo, I have to say, checking my phone every few seconds, and I'm not looking at text messages, I promise. I'm looking at the timer to see how much time I've got before I ask the other question. So I'd like you just to have to look at this video and have a think about what you see.
Have you seen the weather outside today? It's lovely, isn't it?
So we use this speech-based interaction to provide a comparison to when we try to use intensive interaction with ED. It has to be compared to something else. We can't just engage in intensive interaction and say, hooray, look, it all works, it's fantastic. You have to compare it to something else. So that was the comparison session. And I think, well, I hope that you would agree that there isn't very much going on there. So what you see is Edie making her sound. That is her sound that you hear. And she does look at me. So she makes her sound, she looks at me, and it's like she's attempting to engage me in some way. But when I don't give her back anything that she understands or that makes sense to her or is meaningful for her in any way, she shuts down. So she eventually closes her eyes, and what you don't see is after that clip, it lasted for 10 minutes altogether. Not long after that, she actually turned around in bed and faced the wall so that she wasn't facing me anymore. So I don't think she could have made it any more clear how uninteresting I was to her at that point. So what I'm going to show you now is my attempt to use Edie's vocabulary, her non-verbal vocabulary, and to try to use intensive interaction to engage with her. So you will hear me making her sound, you will see me mirroring her bodily movements, her facial expressions. Just have it, see what you think of this one as well. So hopefully what you're seeing there is almost like a different woman. She's very engaged, she's fixed on me, she's very close, facing towards me, lots and lots of her sound. And we're turn-taking using her sound, so the fundamentals of communication there. She's lifting herself up, and it took me ages to realise that what she actually wanted was for me to touch heads with her. And when I eventually do that, that's when you see her eyes fly open and the smile happen. And she laughs and she comes back for more. It was just such a joyful experience for me and for her. You know, we were both laughing. I was actually in tears at one point, you know. It's just incredible to see that happen. So because we had had such success with this very first session, we had thought that maybe this approach does have potential for people with advanced dementia, that's something based on intensive interaction. And we measured this, we coded the videotapes, and we timed certain actions like eye gaze and sounds and movements. And we did this all scientifically. And what we saw were increases in engagement from ED. We saw smiling, vocalising, imitation. So she imitated me, I imitated her. And these are all, of course, these communication fundamentals that I've been talking about. And these findings really encouraged us because we thought, well, maybe this is a way that we can learn the language of people with advanced dementia who no longer speak. So they do have their own language, and maybe we just need to find a way to learn that. In intensive interaction, what happens is, this is with people with learning disabilities, the interactions are built up over time. So you have a partner that you work with, and each time you see them, the interaction goes a bit further, and you can build from the previous session. But because people with advanced dementia have such severe memory impairments, we didn't think we were working with the same approach exactly. So we couldn't really build. We had to adapt to what was happening in the moment. So we then changed the name to adaptive interaction, and that really is our variant of intensive interaction. Okay, so the next step was trying to teach other people how to do this, and trying to encourage people to engage in this with their clients with advanced dementia. So we offered a training programme to a local care home, and they were able to spare 3 members of staff to take part in the training. And we did 1 training session a week for 4 weeks. And each caregiver was paired with a person with advanced dementia, so they always worked with the same person. And we built up these training sessions slowly from week to week, and we encouraged the carers to video the sessions so that we could use them as training materials and discuss what we were seeing in these videos. So the first video I'm going to show you here is John and Yvonne, and this is in week 1. So in week 1, we said to the trainees, what we'd like you to do is go into the person's room and just communicate with them as you normally would, just as you typically would communicate with this person. So I'm going to show you this video clip now, and I'll talk briefly after it about what I see there. Maybe we can talk after about what you see.
Hello, Sleeping Beauty. Hello, John. Hello. I've got a drink for you and a yoghurt. Hey, we'll sit you up a wee bit. Hello. Hi, John, it's Yvonne. I've got some milk for you. Hello. We'll put you up a wee bit, darling, okay? It's coming. There we are. Right, darling. 2 seconds. Right, John, put your milk, darling. There you are. Right, good?
Okay, so again, no fault of anyone's, but when I asked Yvonne to go in and communicate with John as she normally did, it was a functional activity. So it was an activity of daily living. It was giving John something to drink and helping him to eat something. And it wasn't a social interaction. So it had a purpose other than being sociable and just being with the person. So what you see there is she just felt so awkward about going in and being asked just to communicate as she normally would. So she brought something with her to do. And what we found was that all the trainees and almost every trainee since has done the same thing in week one. So sometimes people bring a magazine or a book in to read to the person or to flick through the pages. Some people will bring in objects to look at and to touch. Very, very rarely will a caregiver go in and just sit with the person, because it just doesn't feel like you're actually communicating at all. And it's likely that the caregiver isn't aware that the person is able to communicate in some way. So what I'd like to show you now is week 3 of the training programme, and again this is John and Yvonne having a session together, and what you'd like you to do is look at the differences here. So this is Yvonne now attempting to use adaptive interaction with John. It's very subtle, so I'd encourage you to pay attention to tiny little hand movements. So imitation of hand movements, John reaching out for Yvonne's hand, smiles, just the pace is a lot slower than with Edie. It looks quite different. So I hope that you see what I see there. It's very, very quiet, so Yvonne doesn't feel that she has to talk to John or try to engage him using speech in any way at all. She's using his hand movements to communicate with him. He is smiling. He is very fixed on her. His gaze, he's very, very interested in her. He reaches for her hand when she moves her hand away. It's just such a lovely clip. John's wife at the time had said to me she hadn't seen him smile in years. And, he smiles twice in that video at least. So she was very heartened by it. So this is just to illustrate to you that it is possible to train other people to do this, even though people feel awkward to begin with. I think once you break through and make a connection with someone, you feel very different. So the outcomes of this early work, this is early work, the background story really. What we found for people with dementia is that they were encouraged to communicate in a way that was meaningful for them. So these actions are meaningful for each individual. There was an equality in the relationship between the person with dementia and the carer that had previously been absent. So we have to try and learn the person's language. So therefore, the person is already on a higher footing than they were before when we were trying to use speech to communicate. We also found that people with dementia were being engaged in social interaction just for the sake of it. So instead of having something functional attached to the interaction, it was just a social interaction, and we hopefully all of us have those opportunities, and we may be taken for granted that people with dementia will have the same. We found that this work reduced social isolation, improved quality of life for people with dementia, which was incredible, huge. Outcomes for staff. The staff felt better equipped to communicate with people with advanced dementia. They were more confident, they had more self-efficacy, they believed in themselves more. Trainees thought that the person with advanced dementia were improved in terms of their communication. Now, this is really interesting. So we did a measure before and a measure after, and we asked the trainees to rate your partner with dementia's communicative abilities, and the scores increased after the training. Now, it's unlikely that the person with dementia had improved in terms of their communication over that 4-week period. If anything, because of the nature of dementia, it was more likely that their communication skills would decrease over a 4-week period. However, what this shows is that caregivers were being enabled to identify communication skills in people with advanced dementia, but they didn't before. So we found that finding really interesting. And lastly, the staff gained a knowledge of the fundamentals of communication and how important these are for people who don't have any speech. So this is a whistle-stop tour really of the background to adaptive interaction. Professor Estelle and I have worked together on this for a long time now. We've got lots of publications out there if you're interested in reading any of them. We have a book out together on adaptive interaction. We also provide training to family members and professional caregivers on adaptive interaction. So if you're interested in hearing about that, that's the website address down there, astellis.co.uk. I'd like to thank you very much for inviting me today. Any chance I get to talk about this work, I take it up immediately. I love talking about this work. I think it's just so important that we recognise and work with the skills that people still have. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you. Thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
That's great. Thank you so much, Maggie.
Okay.
You okay to stop sharing?
Yes. There we go.
Brilliant. That was really fascinating, and the films just brought it to life.
Yeah.
It just really, you just understand it. Yeah.
The films are the best part of it. I could just not talk and show the films.
Definitely make it really powerful. We use some films in Empowered Conversations, so it's a communication between a husband and wife, and it delivers so much more than quite often we can.
Yeah.
So the questions have started.
Okay.
Look at this, we've got 3 already.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So Janet said, "Hiya, Janet, Music in Mind, Manchester Camerata. We communicate via music, which works really well."
Mm-hmm. Where am I seeing this? Okay.
So in the Q&A, if you just press the Q&A, I'm
I
happy
see
to
it. I see.
read them.
Hi,
So
Janet. Hi, Janet. Yes, absolutely. Music uses a similar strategy, really. It's non-verbal, and it also uses a lot of turn taking, and music will mimic the movements and the sounds that the person already uses. So it has a lot of similarities with this approach. Yeah, absolutely.
Debbie's put a comment in, bringing a tear to my eye, and I'm glad Alison's added a bit more, because I was like, what? So Alison, wonderful stuff. Thank you. Do you feel there is an additional depth to the communication yet to discover? That is there a way to develop this further?
Yeah, so we are currently looking at the physiological impact of using adaptive interaction. So we collected data a couple of years ago now, taking people's saliva samples before and after they had engaged in this work. And there is now a way to look at cortisol levels and oxytocin levels in the saliva. So cortisol is the stress hormone, and oxytocin is the cuddle hormone, the feel-good hormone. And we would expect cortisol to decrease and oxytocin to rise after adaptive interaction. So we're working towards that. We also have another project that has been funded, and it will be carried out once we're allowed to go back into care homes. We're going to look at using the approach in 4 different care homes in Scotland and measuring the impact over time on family members, people with dementia, and caregivers. So yeah, the work is ongoing. Thanks, Alison.
And that's it, Alison from Cardiff University, who I mentioned earlier, Maggie. So
oh, hi.
Alison, I was just explaining to Maggie how our relationship had developed over the last few years, because there felt similarities in how Maggie had sort of embraced, empowered, and jumped on board with supporting us with Moving Beyond Words, which is a pilot course that Margaret, Claire and Barbara have developed as a follow-on to Empowered Conversations, and Maggie is kindly supporting that course, and will be on that course tomorrow with them all. So yes, that was that relationship. So any more questions, fire them our way. Oh, there are more questions. I just have to scroll down. Can you send us information by email?
Yes.
I can send some I can put some information in the email that everyone gets tomorrow. So we can send that over, Masood, no problem. Karen has asked, hi, this was so interesting and so important to help understand someone living with dementia. Yeah. Debbie, I love that this is such a simple thing to do, but so effective. Thank you for sharing. What's the website again, please?
I'll send that on to you, Emma, and you can send an email to everyone, I think, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, definitely. And then Rachel,
great, thanks.
One of our colleagues has said, thank you for sharing this best practice, Maggie. Utterly amazing, and reminded me of Naomi Fell and Gladys Wilson video. Connection and validation so important.
Yeah.
Barbara, who you know, fantastic. Would I be right to think that for family caregivers, the earlier ones can start to use and identify the person's repertoire? The earlier someone can, yeah, I've read that wrong. The earlier one starts to use and identify the person's repertoire, the better, whilst they're still partially verbal.
Yes, absolutely. Family caregivers are probably best placed to engage in this approach, because they will know the person probably better than the professional carer. But there are other sorts of barriers to using this approach with family members, because they have known the person their whole lives usually, and it just feels strange to be engaging with them in this way. So there are lots of barriers to overcome and lots of information, lots of training to go through before we enter into this sort of an interaction.
Thank you. And Rachel said, can it be used with people who have some communication skills still?
Yes, it can. So when you say some communication skills, I'm assuming you mean speech. Yes, if we had more time, I would show you just a fantastic video of a man called Jim, who was still absolutely able to speak, but he just preferred to communicate using taps. So we tapped on the table backwards and forwards to each other, and it was really like a game. And at one point I thought he had stopped, and I got up to leave the room, and I just heard this bang again. He wanted me to come back and start again. So yes, it is possible to use this with people who still have some speech.
And then Margaret's asked the question, so where carers have been trained in residential homes, do they find time a limiting factor to using it?
Absolutely, yes. What we try to do is encourage carers to see this as a way of being with the person, rather than as something extra you have to do. Because, you know, carers work so hard that giving them something else to do on top of what they already do, you know, is asking a lot. So we try to encourage carers to see this as something, this is the way I communicate with this person, whenever I communicate with this person. And that tends to help people get their heads around it a bit more. But time is always a limiting factor. You know, the grant I was telling you about previously that we got, that we're going to be conducting the research in residential homes, we had to include hours of pay for the carers, so that it could be covered by the care home to bring someone else in to fill in their time, so that they could be trained. So, you know, their time is so precious. And yeah, if you see it as something extra that you have to do, then, you know, it's not something that's going to be at the top of your list.
I was just wondering where, because it's quite a different approach. It's a very different approach for most people. Were carers in residential settings, were they embarrassed to use it to start with?
Yeah. The video you saw with Edie at the start, that was a long time ago now, hence the dodgy hairdo. I was communicating with Edie, and I remember people sort of walking past the door, looking at me like I was, you know, lost the plot, like I'd lost the plot. And people were really kind of against it, because lots of individuals at that point thought this is mockery, you know, this is infantilizing. But the intent that we have with this is to use the person's language to reach them, not to mock them, not to treat them as though they are an infant. We're using the communication skills that they have. And if they happen to be a similar set of communication skills as an infant has, then that's what we use. So yeah, getting people to do it was hard, for lots of different reasons. But as I said, once you make a connection with someone, the embarrassment just falls away and you're just there in the moment.
Brilliant. Brilliant. There was a question from Alison, and it's just appeared, but basically it was, when people go back in to have an interaction, is there some sort of memory of that? Did you notice there was some sort of memory around those interactions?
Oh God, this is such a good question. Obviously, we can't tell for certain, but I often got a feeling that the person recognised me whenever I went back into the room. So this was a really early study, and we did this with, I think it was 5 people. And I often got the feeling that the person recognised me when I went back into the room, and I often got smiles. But we can't be certain, unfortunately.
You've obviously started something, because Debbie wants to see the video with Jim. So is it out there in sort of the public domain? Can we share a link? No, okay.
No, all the videos are, no. I can, if we've got time, I might be able to show you, but.
All right. Well, if you all stop asking questions, you can watch the video. But so if you set that up, Maggie. So Sarah's
right, okay.
Just wonderful, Maggie. Can I just ask where you're going on holiday? No, she hasn't said that. She said, do you think that this is a skill that everyone can learn, or just certain personalities?
Everyone can learn it. Everyone can learn it. Let's think about it this way. When you have, those of you who have children, I don't have children, right? But those of you who have children, if you put will know that if you put a baby in front of someone, the natural thing to do is to imitate what the baby does. They imitate you. It feels natural. It doesn't feel embarrassing to make faces or make sounds. It just feels perfectly natural. And if we could think about it in that way, then I think everyone can do it. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm trying to look for this video. Give me 2 secs.
All right. I'll just chat on. So James has said no question about it, but it was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you very much.
James is living
Thank
with
you.
dementia, so thank you for sharing that. Rachel has said compassion at its best. I think
Thank you so much.
blown everyone's socks off. I'm just making sure that you've shared.
Right. I should have had this. I should have known.
What she said, if we'd have had time, I would show you this. That was it. They all wanted it.
Well, that's it. Yeah. It's just such a good video. Where is it now? Presentation videos. No.
Chris said, are there any additional skills involved with adaptive interaction that are not used in intensive interaction? We use intensive interaction and it absolutely works so well.
Mm-hmm. Are there any skills involved in adaptive interaction that you don't do in intensive interaction? No. I mean, it's a very, very similar approach, but we thought it was important to make the distinction. That this is partly because there's lots of pushback from people who say, well, people with dementia don't have learning disabilities. You can't do that with them. Well, actually, it's about the communication repertoire that people have. It's not about whether they have communication difficulties, learning disabilities, anything like that. Sorry, I'm trying to talk to you while I'm looking for this. It's coming.
You found it?
Nearly.
Maybe look at the pressure you've put poor Maggie under.
Give me 2 secs.
So Debbie is apologetic. She said sorry, but I think it's like sorry, not sorry. Because she really
I think so. Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Right. So I'm looking for my slides here. No, that's the wrong one. No, that's the wrong one. No, I'm not finding it.
You know what I'm going to suggest, Maggie?
What's that?
It's a cheeky suggestion, but I think you come back and we do another one.
Brilliant. Happy to. What was that?
Family member knocking on the window at me. Why don't we do it again? Why don't we we'll get another date in and we'll, if you don't mind giving us that time,
I'd love to.
People want to see more of your work and more of your films. Is that okay?
Sure, so I can tell you more about where the research has gone since then, and then I can show you more videos. I'd love to. Yeah, sign me up.
There we go. It takes a bit of pressure off now, doesn't it?
It does a bit, yeah. I know it's there somewhere. I just can't pinpoint it.
Is there a question there? Lauren has said, thank you for such an interesting session. I'm a student occupational therapist and communicating effectively with service users is key to building a successful therapeutic relationship. This has been really useful. Anna said, that would be super. Oh, everyone's got behind the idea that you should come back and do another one.
Yeah, I'd be totally up for that. As I said, I can talk the hind legs off a donkey, and when it comes to this subject, it's even more.
Fantastic. Maggie, I just want to say a huge thank you for today. It's been, obviously I've been looking at some of your work, I've been reading about it and I've been hearing about it, but it's been amazing just to find out more about it and to, as I said, watch the videos. So thank you very much. Thank you everyone who's come to watch today. I hope you found, well, I know you have just by your comments, we know you found it interesting. Our next webinar is in a few weeks. It's a conversation with Rare Dementia Support on the 21st of April. So I'll send out a link for that if you're interested in coming along. Let me just see if there was one more question. Oh, Amanda, brilliant. So basically all the Empowered team are going, yeah, come and do another one. Brilliant. Looking forward to the next seminar with you. Can we have one of these every week, please, Maggie? Is that okay?
Yeah, no problem. Just one thing before I go about the difference between adaptive interaction and intensive interaction. When you're building the interactions over time with the person with learning disabilities, it's not possible to do it in the same way with people with dementia, because they are very unlikely to remember the contents of the previous session, or even you as a person. So we thought that was an important distinction to draw as well, that we're not expecting people to build sessions over time or build a relationship. It's all in the moment.
Brilliant. Thank you for just clarifying that.
It's okay.
I'm just going to check. There's one more. Oh, Joy. There's one more question from Joyce. She says, have you found a better result if the partnership has been established in the early days?
Oh, that is a good question. That's not something that we've looked at. We haven't had the opportunity to go in to care homes recently and look at that. But that's something that we could definitely look at in this next study. Thanks for the tip.
So Joy is one of our colleagues and she's living with dementia. So that's sort of very much from
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you for that. Right then, I am going to bring this to an end. I'm going to say thank you again, Maggie. I'm going to say thanks everyone for coming along. I hope you all have lovely days. It's certainly sunny in Salford. So I'm definitely going to be out in the garden in a few hours' time. So thank you. Have a lovely day.
Okay.
We will see you
Thanks,
again.
everyone. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.